Okay, good morning, HIUS 435 Liberty University. This morning, I just want to go tell a little about the legacy of Jonathan Edwards. First and foremost, I want to just discuss three important ideas that Jonathan Edwards had um, as far as regards to the way that he preached. You know, first thing I need to say is that Jonathan Edwards was probably one of the most brilliant and talented theologians of history. Um, Jonathan Edwards really um, made it to where he could save a lot of these colonists who didn't really know Jesus Christ. They were classified as almost Christians, meaning that they knew all the doctrine and they knew all the scriptures and they knew all the Bible verses, but they didn't really know Jesus Christ. They weren't saved. And there were three important ideas that, or you can call them arguments for the God of Christianity. As far as Jonathan Edwards, first he viewed the simultaneous truth of God's sovereignty and human responsibility, which is also called compatibilism, as paradoxical and humanly incomprehensible, but not actually contradictory in nature. One of the second important ideas was that all humanity inherited sinfulness, guilt, and moral corruption through the relationship with Adam. Now, this sober and pessimistic view of human nature, it stood in sharp contrast to the optimistic view that emerged in the colonies back in this time, which was just prior to the American Revolution. And it's really still persists today in some of the evangelicalism to this day. Jonathan Edwards, he really struck fear into the hearts of these colonists, and that second idea goes into the one of his works, which was the sinners in the hands of an angry God, which talks about sin, and that at any point in time, the colonists, he made it clear to any point in time that their lives could be taken, and if they're not saved and don't know Jesus Christ, they're not gonna be saved by Jesus and get to see the face of God. Edwards argued that all of the realities of life and being, including the world, knowledge, moral virtue, and of course salvation from sin, it depended upon God. The Enlightenment view of human autonomy was very antithesis of Edwards' theological description of fallen humans as being desperate, as being weak, depraved, and dependent on creatures. And I think that as far as today's standards are concerned with his legacy, when the question is that why does Jonathan Edwards matter today, Jonathan Edwards is criticized in certain theological cities, or cities that really talk about theologianism a lot, and in these theological circles, some of his works are criticized for his alleged pessimistic and deterministic form of puritanical Calvinism, I guess you can say. But his unteetering work as a Puritan theologian and philosopher really made him one of America's greatest thinkers, and that's what really set him apart. Um, he made enduring contributions in the fields of theology, physiology, and psychology of religion. Um, when evangelical Christians today speak of someone coming forth at an altar to receive Christ, which is such an amazing, great feeling, they are describing a religious practice that has its historical roots in the revivalism of which Edwards wrote about. This is what Edwards was all about, and evaluated theologically. Edwards' legacy really as an extraordinary Christian thinker who stood so close to God, in awe of his majesty and sovereignty, and it really gives Christians, both back then in the colony days, back in the mid 1700s and late 1700s, all the way up until now, it gives them someone who's worthy of respect. And Jonathan Edwards, really, with his teachings and his preachings, it was really because of him that, as I said before, a lot of these Christians who were classified as almost Christians actually became full-fledged Christians, knowing, accepting Jesus Christ as a Christ Savior, and that impact back in the colony days, it rings true all the way up into today's standards. Today, we still study Jonathan Edwards, we still read his works, we still look at his preachings and look at his sermons and how much of an impact he made in the world back then, and it just kind of reverberates all the way up until today, and even into the future. Jonathan Edwards is going to be remembered as a brilliant, talented, and theologian who, because of him, I believe that history was changed for the good. And if it wasn't for Jonathan Edwards, I believe that today would be a lot different as far as Christians and knowing Jesus Christ as Christ's Savior, and how we go about with our everyday lives and worshiping God. And it's so important to stay close and stay faithful to God and faithful to Jesus. And without Jonathan Edwards, I don't think that would have been possible, since he had such a big impact on Christians back then. Thank you. You guys have a great afternoon. God bless.